Hello and welcome to Smaulgld. In case you missed the top gold, silver, and crypto stories for the week ended October 28th, 2018. Germany to buy natural gas from the United States. Here are some of the stories we're going to be covering. The dollar index is near an 18-month high. Mailer of suspect packages is arrested. Pittsburgh synagogue attacker kills 11. UK Mint halts plans for blockchain gold offering. Sudan boosts gold production. China boosts infrastructure spending. And a caravan from Central America marches closer to the United States. Palladium hits an all-time high. Senator Cory Booker accused of sexual misconduct. And crypto regulation becoming clearer and clearer. Let's take a look at the gold and silver prices. There's your small gold mugs. Make sure you pick them up. So as some of you know, or most of you know, each and every night around 8 or 9 o'clock, we do a live stream on YouTube. And here's just a recap of the evening live streams that we've done over the past week. You can check them out on BitChute or on YouTube, or at best on the Smaulgld channel. On the Smaulgld channel, you can see all the charts that we produced for each of the videos, and you can look at them at your leisure. So we covered big increases in JP Morgan and Brink's COMEX vaults. We discussed why Saudi Arabia's importance geopolitically is no longer just about oil and the dollar. We discussed China, how it rushes to save the Shanghai Stock Exchange by injecting liquidity. We asked, do you have gold or silver derangement syndrome? And then we covered the stocks melting down, gold going higher and silver actually falling. And we also went through somewhere gold is having a great year, and we found many jurisdictions in many currencies gold is doing quite well this year. Charts are available for that story as well. Silver hoarding on the rise. We covered the big silver stockpiles and their growth. And we asked, can a crypto bubble save Wall Street, with Matt from Silver Fortune? All right, so gold closed last week at $12.32. That was up about $6.30 from the week before. Silver managed to close, that's a mistake there, at $14.65, not $16.65, up a nickel. Over the last month, we've had an increase in the gold-silver ratio from about 81.3 to 1 all the way up to 84.15 to 1. There's your 100-year excuse me, gold-silver ratio. All right, so in a lot of the stories this week, there was a lot of turmoil, domestic-style terrorism in the United States. There were a number of package bombs sent out across the country to, I think it was the CNN building, and then also to some prominent Democrats, former President Obama, Hillary Clinton, George Soros, Maxine Waters, and a few others. And these were very rudimentary style bombs, and they found the guy who mailed them within just a couple of days of them being sent. So the next story, breaking person in custody in connection with mail bomb probe. Cory Booker, this seems like months ago, but this was only at the beginning of the week. Someone accused him of an uncorroborated story of sexual misconduct, and the only reason I guess that was of note, I'm sure that there are unfounded and uncorroborated stories all the time about people committing sexual misconduct. It's just that Cory Booker was in a high-profile situation just a month ago and during the Kavanaugh hearings, where he was taking the position that accusations in a sense should be enough to derail a nomination. And of course, I'm sure he doesn't believe that to be the case in his circumstances, that he should just step down as senator because somebody has accused him. Although, if the shoe were on the other foot, he might ask for some type of FBI investigation, and may even ask for the accuser to come in, hold a televised question and answer session with Congress, but I don't think that's going to happen. Now, this caravan that's been inching closer towards the United States, very interesting. They're supposed to be families. I don't really have a view on this, other than it seems pretty obvious that this is organized. It's not like people just decided up and go. there has to be some level of organization in getting people logistically from point A to point B, especially if you're talking about over 1,000 miles. And it seems to be a lot of men. And the other thing I noticed in these pictures, and people have noticed other things as well, is the lack of luggage that they're carrying. They seem to be all traveling on foot. They seem relatively well rested. So they obviously have some sort of help and rest points. They must, because you just cannot make a 1,000-mile walk in your tennis shoes and a t-shirt. You're going to have places to stay along the way, places to eat, places to get refreshed, and so on. Now, Trump is saying he's going to stop this, and apparently this week he's hinted at a couple of the rallies that he's held that people are going to be surprised. I don't know what he's going to do. I haven't thought about it, but I know they're sending 800 troops to the border to stop this. He's told them not to come, but he hasn't told them in any type of warning fashion, like if you show up, you will be dealt with in a very violent manner. So it sounds like they've got some ability to return the people or send them back the other way, or maybe they expect that they won't even get there. I don't know, but we'll be following that. And that was becoming a big story during the week. It's probably be a big story again next week now that they found this person sending the packages. All right, let's see what else. Well, there's and again, this seems like months ago too, but this is Senator Elizabeth Warren, I guess trying to keep her story alive, which she probably should want it to just fade away. But she was saying she took the test to prove her heritage. She wanted to build trust in government because it's at an all-time low, and she wanted to help build it by being transparent. Not sure she helped her case with that one, but and I probably won't hear from her again for a while, so it's probably better for her. Now, Trump's been doing a lot of these rallies. One interesting thing he said was he's a nationalist, and of course that conjures up some negative connotations. So, for example, a lot of the media and people started calling him a Nazi because Hitler was a nationalist, and there's the concept of white nationalist. What's interesting is these words become what people want them to be. Now, I know when I was studying history that nationalism was a period of time that we learned about that occurred in the mid to late 19th century. And as I recall, they spoke of nationalism almost in glowing terms. It was the idea the German people were getting unified, the Italian people were unifying, and the United States too. They couldn't have these Confederate states. There needed to be one nation, one union under Lincoln. Italy was going to be unified under Garibaldi. Germany under Bismarck. And in a sense, nationalism back then was the enemy of localism or city-states. It was the globalism of its time. The Confederates wanted to stay, and many in the United States, not just in the North, not just in the South, but many in the North also liked the idea of the small states having more sovereignty than having one national government. Lincoln wanted the full union. Irrespective of slavery, he did want a union. And he did say, he made many statements to that effect, that I would have the union, whether it's all slave, all free, half slave, half free. To him, union was the main thing, that was the zeitgeist of the time. Garibaldi united Sicily with Turin. They're two places that didn't have a lot in common. Even the Italian language, you would say, was suspect that the way the people spoke, the language they spoke in Sicily, was even close to what they spoke in Milan. But yet, the idea was, and I remember learning about this, was all a good thing, that nationalism, and it had no overtones of racism or anything like that. In fact, it was meant to put into a nation and homogenize the people so that they wouldn't have these regional and often these violent differences. So, for example, in Italy, the idea of nationalism was to erase the racism that might have existed between the peoples of the North and the South. The idea of nationalism in the United States was to eliminate the slavery that existed in one part of the country, and that the whole country would share national values. Italy would have a national language. Germans would all speak the same language. It wasn't meant to be. And I never learned nationalism as a racist or an evil movement. And now what it's become, because nationalism is actually the bulwark against globalism, that the nationalists are the ones that are acting like the Confederate States, or the ones acting like the city-states that did not want to go along with the nationalist movement. So basically, it's just taking your component parts. When you had city-states, what you had in the mid-19th century were nationalists and individual states, like in the United States, and there was a move towards making a tighter union in order to perform a more perfect union. You even had some of that in the late 18th centuries in the United States. When they formed the United States, there was a good portion, and it wasn't just a Southern thing, of people who did not want a strong central government. You had the Federalists, you had the Anti-Federalists, and the Federalists were nationalists. They wanted a strong central government, a strong national government, not a strong global government. So the nationalism that I learned was Italy, Germany, the United States, and that was a 19th century movement to create. And now what it is it's the baby sister of globalism, and it actually appears to be more like a tribal movement, where you have people in an individual country looking after their interests rather than the global interests. Whereas with nationalism back in the 19th century, you had a country looking after its own interests versus the interests of the local city-states or individual states. So it's just an interesting aside from how words can change their meanings, their connotations, and so on. Okay. Uh-oh. Well, here, this says 25% of students said they were traumatized. This is students by the 2016 election. Now we've got the prognosticators out. We'll revisit this in about 10 days. Bloomberg says Democrats lead 9 points in the poll. I think they're talking about the House of Representatives. Now the House, I would say that generic polls are useless. You have to go district by district in order to make your determination, because a generic poll is going to take into account some areas where, let's say, the Democrats have that lead because they may have some landslides. They may have some seats in California where they may win by 20, 30 points. And they may have some seats that they lose by a lot. They may lose a lot of seats by 3 percentage points. That doesn't really give you the clear picture. When you average it out, it shows the Democrats leading by 9 points. So I don't like the generic poll in the House. I like to see, you really have to do poll by poll, district by district. The problem with those polls, it's hard for pollsters. It's a lot of work to get into a district and get a large enough representative sample to tell. Now, the Senate, they can do a better job because it's statewide, and what they try to do is get enough people across the state. But even there, I think it's difficult. But there's Beto O'Rourke hoping to unseat Ted Cruz. And here's Reuters thinking Republicans fear Democratic blue wave. What's interesting is the way they phrase these things. I think both sides are fearing the other's wave. I'm not sure that one side is more concerned than the other. But here's the one I want to follow. It's just 538. This is the famous Nate Silver. And he is saying that there's an 85.7% chance, this is change, but they meant chance, that they win the House. Now, again, I think that's based on, I don't know Nate's methodology. I really should take a look at it. But I think if it's on that generic ballot, that is misleading. It's the same with, I think, the reason that he might have messed up the Hillary Clinton. If you take a national poll, and maybe his poll was correct nationally, Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote. It doesn't matter if you win Wisconsin by 8 votes and lose California by 20 million votes. The percentage may show that you have fewer votes. But the real issue, again, is just like in those House races, in the Electoral College, you have to win the Electoral College vote. It's quite possible, although it's possible if somebody wants to only win the popular vote and decides they're going to be best buddies with the voters in the states of New York, Florida, Texas, Illinois, California, and a couple other states, and they only go there, and they put a wampin on, you know, they win 70-30, but then they lose everywhere else by like 2 points, they could lose. And yet they can win the popular vote 65-35. So interesting to see what methodology they use. I mean, 85.7% chance the House. That's what they thought was going to happen with Hillary Clinton. They said she had an 85 point, almost identical percent chance of winning the White House, and we know what happened. All right, let's see. So you've got this race here, Kirsten Siena and what's her name, McSally. That's supposedly close in Arizona. There's some fireworks here. The reason I have this guy here is this is just a place mark. He's going to run for president, and pretty much he is, I think, the Donald Trump of the Democratic Party. And you've got all these people lining up. You've got Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Joe Biden. You'll have all Senator Elizabeth Warren. They're probably all going to Bernie Sanders. And they're all going to be viewed as pretty much, you know, on policy, not very different. And I think this guy's going to run, and he'll probably stand out, and maybe people take a shine to him. And we'll see what happens. But he's similar to Trump in that he will say what he needs to say. And pretty much right now, no one gives him a shot. But we'll keep an eye on him going forward. Now, this is interesting. I thought this was the Onion. UK government bans the phrase fake news. I don't know what they're going to gain from that. Urging ministers to say misinformation or disinformation. I don't see if it's fake. It's fake. It's the same thing. But there's your George Orwellian moment for the week. Now, U.S. economic data, the economy grew at 3.5% in the third quarter. That's down from the 4.3% it grew in the second quarter. Fed is still talking about raising rates. There's our friend, I think she's Cleveland Fed President Meister. He's like, yep, we still got to keep hiking rates. Now, remember, the Fed is raising rates while all the other central banks have them at zero or negative, and they're still doing QE, and they're just talking about ending their QE programs. They're just talking about eventually raising rates. So the U.S. is really going in the exact opposite direction, and Powell and Meister are still saying, we're going to give you the rate hikes. Now, this was interesting. Tesla, which has been having all sorts of problems, and we're not going to detail here, but they managed to show a surprise profit. Now, I haven't dug through their financials, and I'm not going to, but a lot of people are looking at this and with a raised eyebrow, but we'll see. And now here we go. Elon Musk, who runs Tesla, his company SpaceX wants to borrow $500 million from Goldman Sachs. I said they'll probably get it. Now, with your Manafort, Mueller, Comey page, Brennan FBI stroke page, all that stuff, Rosenstein, not much to report on other than this lowly guy. When I say low, it's not a, I don't mean he's lowly, but I mean in the grand scheme of things, he was somebody who was in the Trump campaign on the periphery, youngish guy, and I think he was trying to make a name for himself as somebody who could be I think a foreign policy advisor specializing in a certain region of the world. Maybe it was Crimea or Turkey. I don't remember what his expertise was, but apparently he had met with some guy named Joseph Massoud, some kind of professor. They invited him to give some type of talk in, I don't know, some university or some setting where he could make his bones, so to speak, as a policy guy, understanding whatever the relationship between whatever country it was. And then he would assist the Trump campaign in giving that type of advice that, okay, so if you become president, you have to understand this is how Turkey works or Crimea works, whatever it was. But apparently he had been contacted and said, yeah, like we got some stuff on Hillary Clinton and be interested in that. And, you know, he's like, okay, all right, what do you got? I mean, I don't think he was that's not what his job was. And I'm sure it was probably tempting to him to think, hey, I can really make a name for myself if I get this information. Well, it turns out from what he's intimating, what other people have said, that perhaps this was all a ploy in the first place to basically say that the Trump administration was interested in the dirt on Hillary Clinton and that he was getting this directly from, people associated with the Russians, when now they're saying that maybe that this guy was set up from the FBI itself to make it look like he was being approached on behalf of the Russians so that they could spy on the campaign. And he's saying, can't discuss his testimony, but after today's hearing, the scandal is much worse than anyone can imagine. Now, I have read, and who knows what to believe, but I have read that book, what is it, The Russian Hoax, and it is well documented and sourced that maybe they did try to frame not just Papadopoulos, but other people, and to make it look like the Trump campaign has colluded with the Russians. Now, you tell that to somebody who's firmly believed that Mueller's been, all over the Trump campaign, and that they point to these indictments, but none of the indictments have anything to... They've shown that Manafort and Cohen have done financially shady things, but not in connection with the campaign, and not even in connection with Russia. It's not even like Cohen got in trouble for hiding his tax money in Russia. He got in trouble for something to do with some taxi cabs he was running, making a lot of money and not reporting it. Same as Manafort, not reporting bank accounts, not reporting something else that they had done. Both of them pretty much the same thing. It's not just income, but, oh, I know what it was. They both, I think, made false statements on loans. I mean, these are the indictments. And the other indictments were indictments of a Russian troll farm and Russian individuals who bought Facebook ads. But again, and not in conjunction with the Trump campaign. And this stuff happens all the time. It's not just this election that the Russians did this. They do it all the time. Chinese do it. All countries do it. The U.S. does it all. So it's nothing specific to Trump at all. But it just seems there's a lot more research into looking at this from what exactly were they doing. And there seems to be a lot of people that look at it the other way and they just make the assumption Trump's a bad guy, so he must have done this. There's no way he could have won. He must have had Russian collusion, otherwise there wouldn't be Mueller. And I don't think they've spent the time, they just think it's propaganda, to look at what some of these people have said they've done, and possibly that there is something there, as Papadopoulos is saying. And we'll never know. Maybe we will know. Supposedly there's these documents out there that are declassified, the FISA warrants, some of the other documents, the 302s and so on, that will get the full picture. Some people think they've got it figured out already. I think the Republicans in the House, they've seen it. They think they already have it figured out. I think Trump knows the game. I think he's seen the documents. And I think the only reason he hasn't released them is he doesn't need to. I think he realizes that, there's nothing's going to happen. But if he needs them, it's almost like having his insurance policy. He just releases all those documents, and he shows the conflicts, and he shows the information, who paid whom, and so on. All right, so that story's kind of faded to the background. I think it'll come back to the forefront depending on the results of the election. If you have a Democratic do take the House and they start these investigations, I think then you'll see those documents be released and declassified quick, fast, and in a hurry, so they can show them perhaps a counter to what they may wish to investigate. But then, of course, they'll go after Trump for his tax returns and a bunch of other stuff. The issue with impeachment, which is probably very ill-advised, is because they're not going to get the 66%, the 67 senators, even if they take control of the Senate, unless they find something so egregious. But even then, I mean, they did this in 1998 to Bill Clinton. They spent all the time to pull together all the evidence. They sent the impeachment to the Senate, and the Senate voted on it. And they said, no, thank you. So it's very hard to impeach and get a conviction. And I think that would be a mistake to try that, because if you don't win, then you haven't advanced your position. You spent more time not having a position other than trying to get rid of the president. That's my free advice to the Democrats. They should oppose him on issues rather than just trying to remove him. Because obviously, if they oppose him on issues, they can remove him in 2020 if they actually have issues to run on in 2020. If they squander the next 2 years trying to remove him without presenting issues other than we're going to remove him, and you don't remove him, then you can't say you were effective in removing him. And then you have the people that I mentioned, that list of people, if they're part of that process, they'll, I think, would be seen to have not done their job. And that's where a guy like Avenatti can come along. So I can get rid of him. I'm a lawyer. I know all the tricks. And anyway. And now here's one. India sells over 15 billion U.S. government bonds amid rising rates. This is something that people maybe miss here, is that when people sell treasuries, the automatic assumption is dumping the dollar, end of dollar hegemony, foreigners don't want our debt anymore. Yeah. Sometimes they sell bonds because they need dollars. Now, that sounds strange, but if you have to pay debts, dollar-denominated debts, you don't turn over the bonds. You sell the U.S. treasuries, you get the dollars, and you pay your debt. So selling a treasury doesn't mean dumping treasuries, gold 50,000, dollar collapse, game over, game changer, end of dollar hegemony. No, it means they need to raise dollars. But here it is. They will sell, this is something, I don't even know what he was talking about here, Chris. He says they will sell U.S. treasuries to obtain U.S. dollars to achieve that goal. I knew at the time, but I wrote, and the dollar collapse crowd will treat the dollar shortage and increased demand for the dollar by screaming, China is dumping treasuries. Game over for the dollar. People, they've been so convinced of that. And the other one is there's no gold at Fort Knox. And the Chinese build stuff and we don't build anything. And everyone else in the world has got to figure it out. And they're fully upfront about everything they do. And the United States just makes up stuff and doesn't have any gold. And therefore, they're not smart. Now, here's our top story, I guess. The new natural gas dollar backed by U.S. liquefied natural gas. You know, we talk about the petrodollar backed by Saudi oil. And that the Saudis only price their oil and accept oil, dollars for oil. And that underpins the dollar. And the petrodollar is going to end. And it's going to be end of dollar hegemony. Well, first of all, that was true. The reason for the use of the dollar back in the 70s and early 80s was that indeed that arrangement had been struck. Since then, countries hold dollars for in excess and hold dollar reserves in far more than they need to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. They use them in their own debt issuances. The dollar is got a life of its own as a reserve asset. But if you do need dollars to buy oil, well, the United States is now a larger oil producer than Saudi Arabia, will soon be a larger oil exporter. It exports massive amounts of natural gas, and now it's going to be exporting it to Germany, and it's also going to start exporting coal. So the idea is that this concept, end of the petrodollar, they're not thinking through the full implications of what's exactly going on. And here's China. People's Bank of China injects 120 billion yuan into open market operation, trying to prevent that 40% slide in their Shanghai Stock Exchange from getting any worse. And they did manage to get it to tick up about 5% one day last week. All right. The Economist, they actually say now, they're admitting that there are re-education camps in China and that they try to teach, I guess they're Muslims, that they had to eat pork and drink alcohol as punishment. But I don't know if you've had that happening in the United States. I don't think that would fly. All right. Let's see what else is happening in China. Here, that's the 17 billion they put into the market in one day alone. Reverse repost to maintain, they call it liquidity. It's to boost the price. One of China's biggest funds getting ready to dump stocks. Kyle Bass reposted this. This shows the this is the amount of debt to GDP that the country creates. So you see the blue line going higher as to how much debt that they create in order to make the GDP. The GDP is the red line, and you can see the the red line is the debt and the blue line is the GDP. And you can see that red line just running away from the GDP. And that's an indication that they've reached their Minsky moment, in that they have to issue more debt to produce less GDP. And it gets worse and worse, as you can see there, that at least the U.S. has higher GDP than China does, and China has created more debt during that period. All right, China to crush the dollar. Game over. There's the other thing the people in China have to worry about, if they're allowed to, is that soon, by 2020, all 1.4 billion of their citizens will have a personal social credit score based on how they act, how well they behave with the government, and that will allow them or disallow them from buying property, getting on trains, planes, and automobiles, and so on. But there's still people out there praising China for its gold holdings. Sun Tzu says, borrow what you don't have to build what you don't need. If you owe debt to yourself, it's not a problem. We actually hear people say, oh, their debt's just all internal. It's not like the United States, so it's not a problem. Yeah, okay. The United States owes money to itself, too. Who does it owe money to? Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security recipients. Don't worry about it. We owe it to ourselves. Gold, back yuan, game changer. Yeah, the yuan has gotten crushed ever since the gold, back yuan, game changer story from last fall, September, in the Asian Nikkei review. China to crush the dollar. Dollar collapse. Dollar is it. The other one, China has pegged the yuan to gold. Like they have that power. It doesn't matter until it does. So many cliches that we hear. All right, let's see what else. You borrow what you cannot repay to build that which you do not need or will ever use. Sun Tzu on growing GDP. Gold back yuan. Well, here we go. China spent $328 billion on transport infrastructure alone from January to September. More credit to prop up their economy. But they've got gold as a strategic asset. Now, over to the cryptos. We're going to cover this tonight more. A lot going on. And really, the cryptocurrency market hasn't been devastated. It's actually just been flat for 2 months. Just flat, flat, flat. It's been less volatile in stocks and bonds. Gold and silver is just sitting there, especially Bitcoin. Now, this could be, I don't know, calm before the storm, the tide going out before the tsunami comes in, or it could just be no more interest. But what's interesting is we have seen this backed launch coming up, which is a consortium with Microsoft, New York Stock Exchange, Starbucks. It's supposed to be this massive platform where you buy, sell, store physical Bitcoin futures markets. Van Eck and 8 others have Bitcoin ETFs pending this month, next month. Fidelity and TD Ameritrade are launching crypto trading platforms. Coinbase, Poloniex have SEC registrations coming up. Coinbase working with Goldman Sachs Circle to issue a stable coin. They're getting their New York State financial license to store cryptocurrency. So there's a lot going on, but we're not really hearing much about it in the sense that anyone's paying attention that has any impact on the price. There's an Indian Bitcoin ATM. And let's see, what else? Now, everyone knows about Tether. Tether has been held up as a problem child for the stable coins. It was the first one. It's on, I think it's on Binance. People worried that it doesn't have the dollars to back. It's supposed to be a one-to-one cryptocurrency backed by dollars. People are not trusting that it has all the dollars. It's almost like the Mt. Gox of exchanges. It was the first one, and people have been suspicious of it. But a lot of people don't realize there's so many of these other stable coins. In fact, Gemini, the Winklevoss twins, have issued one. It's regulated, again, by the state of New York. It's got FDIC insurance for the dollars that they have. Coinbase just released one of these stable coins. It's available on the trading platform, so you don't have to convert into fiat currency. You can convert into a cryptocurrency that's backed by dollars. It's called a stable coin. HTC launches a blockchain-focused phone, and you can only buy it with Bitcoin or Ethereum. Now, that's a first, and you don't hear much about that either. Now, New York Stock Exchange owners, Bitcoin futures market will open in mid-December. They're saying subject to getting this regulatory approval. That backed consortium of Microsoft, New York Stock Exchange, Starbucks, and the Boston Consulting Group will go live. Now, if it actually does have Bitcoin futures and they have to be physically delivered and they do have this platform and they do have institutional interest in it, one would think that would be a big deal, but so far they're not. It's interesting, the stuff that people pump. I mean, you see all kinds of stuff that isn't even true that they pump. This story's just out there in front of their faces. I guess because it's 50 days away, maybe closer to the time of launch, you're going to see some mega pumping. But I guess you don't get any credit for pumping something if it's known. You get more credit for pumping nonsense like gold back yuan coming, game changer, COMEX default, when it's not happening. They just want to say this so they can say that Deutsche Bank is going to collapse next week. There's always one of those stories out there. They get a lot of, that's a real pump. If something's known, I guess you don't pump it as much. But the news is out there, but no one's pumping it. Coinbase and Circle announced launch of, this is their own dollar coin, not the Gemini one. Circle is invested in by Goldman Sachs. Very interesting story. We're going to cover this tonight in our, a little more detail in our evening live stream. But here, this is the Van Eck people met with the SEC, and we're going to go through this tonight as well, and they're trying to address the issues that they've had over this not getting an ETF approved. And one of them is storage, and it looks like that issue has been solved by Coinbase, will be solved by Bakkt. They'll have all regulated storage. I think they're going to be sorted out on their surveillance issues. So it's possible that they may approve a Bitcoin ETF probably after the Bakkt thing goes live. But and it's not just Van Eck. There's at least 8 or 9 large companies interested in doing these Bitcoin ETFs. But here's Coinbase approved to offer crypto services in New York. This document we'll go through tonight. The document that Van Eck presented to the SEC. Here you got Mark Cuban. He's got an ICO for sports betting. We'll cover most of these stories tonight. So I think we'll leave it here. And remember, we do this week in review every week. Sign up on Smaulgld.com to receive the weekly update. Also, make sure you subscribe to this BitChute channel or this YouTube channel. And then you can find us on all the other social media platforms. And we will see you tonight. Thank you.